In so many wrong ways, New York is an empire state. New York State has the second largest population of lifers. 1 out of every 5 individuals in New York State prisons have a life sentence.
For over 4 decades, the parole board has been dominated by law enforcement commissioners from the white rural areas of upstate and former prosecutors, and they have been very punitive in making decisions.
Green Haven had a cluster of individuals in there with now excessive sentences from the 80s and 90s. You had like a 5-year period that people with life sentences was not released. 0% was released for 5 years in that maximum facility that houses approximately 2,000 individuals.
During the 70s, lengthier sentence reduced out. 50 years, 75 years. And then there was little opportunity for release. The parole board wasn't releasing people. And this is where organizations like PACT comes in. PACT trains us. It actually trains us to not only articulate our message, but to deliver it in a way that it actually impacts the people who we're trying to reach.
PACT, Stanford Project for Calculated Transition, is one of the top-notch organizations in Green Haven Correctional Facility, and we have a motto. It says, "You don't choose PACT, PACT chooses you." So I didn't know that I was being surveilled when I got to the facility.
In PACT, they call us a secret society. To become a member or to fill out application, a member has to recommend you.
They review you, first of all, and they look to see if you are of stellar quality, because it's not a skull and bones organization, but it's an organization that picks its members.
One of the objectives of the PACT organization is to ensure that its members understand the law.
Most of the people that were in PACT worked in the law libraries. We were actually helping people work on their cases. We talked to guys about doing positive things, educating themselves. You had people who had long sentences that were in prison, and the college prison program had been there, and we say, why aren't you taking advantage of this? We say, you have a case, but you know nothing about the case. You know nothing about the legal ramifications, just that you got sentenced. So we're convincing other people by these types of projects that they too need to be doing something different.
Guys that are in our organization, we try to talk to them and say, hey, listen, if there's something that you need help with, we're here.
Us and our community. What I like most about PACT is that they're a community. They're a bunch of people that care, that want to see something different inside the prison system, that wants to see people do better for themselves. If I need help, I go to them. They come to me, they help me. They build me up. So that's what PACT is about.
We fit the 2 components of self-development, self-empowerment, and dealing with the overall oppressive conditions that we basically inherited. That's where it's so vital that we have organizations like PACT.
The character research segment of PACT, we have an opportunity to educate men. I'm not going to see a parole board for another 21 years, right? But there are men who are leaving tomorrow, and they need to be well prepared. I mean, who's gonna do it if nobody's coming from outside? We have to do it.
There were so many progressive programs in Green Haven. Everybody was trying to get involved with something good in Green Haven. PACT became a mainstay. Yale also reached out to them around 1982.
I have been doing work in prison on a volunteer basis since I was 18. And I started at Green Haven. As I listened to my fellow students at Yale Law School, I heard people who were talking about policy, who come from a very privileged background, who were talking about what the policies should be that would impact on people they didn't know. What I wanted to do was have Yale Law students and the men at Green Haven learn from each other. That was the goal.
When you go into the program as a student, as a law student, as I did, many years ago, you immediately have so many myths and stereotypes upended and demolished really by that experience. To go in that space and be immediately surrounded by folks that are brilliant, that are well-read, that are learned, that have so much to teach and offer to the world, it immediately shows you one of the greatest and most dramatic dysfunctions of our current system, which is that we lock up so many people who have so much to offer.
There's a lot of good guys in prison. There's a lot of guys that waiting to go home. And they're ready to go home and do something for their community. We already have examples like that.
When I first met Roy, I believe it was in Green Haven Yard. We sat down at the table. I was already a PACT member.
I go to the yard, and I'm walking around with one of the PACT members, who I didn't even know was a PACT member.
He struck me right away as someone that had did a lot of self-development at that point.
Anthony Dixon was the anchor that pulled me into PACT years ago. What Anthony saw in me was that this is not a guy who belongs in prison.
He came in 2 weeks after he turned 18. He was given 80 years at 18. An earthquaking sentence.
I left the cell and I had come out into the day room area this morning, and an old timer had approached me and started talking to me, and he said he wanted to impart some wisdom, and in the midst of imparting his wisdom he started crying and told me that it's so hard to see a guy like me leave because of the good spirit. And he said everybody in the prison system is expecting me to do something very big to represent them. And I don't believe in coincidence. I think for him to be at the door on my way walking out was something that I needed to hear. And then he kept saying, "I'm so sorry for crying. I don't mean to cry," and he kept wiping his eye. And I said, "It's all right, you can cry." It's just heart-wrenching, It's you leave, it's bittersweet. More sweet than bitter, but it's bitter in the sense that you've become attached to struggling and people who deserve a second chance, and to just leave them behind after so many years of being with them, it's like a shock to the system. But it was time for me to go. After 31 years, it was time to go.
Through Roy Bolus, the governor has recognized PACT as a re-entry program. With that, he's placed me in a position to for executive clemency. While he was in prison for 3 decades, what he did was he accomplished a Bachelor of Science. He had 2 master's degrees, and he was working on his PhD. The governor was greatly impressed by him, and he wanted to look into the fact that what was the organization that you was last in that led you to be this type of individual. So he was able to bring about a new dynamic to the PACT organization.
I told the executive board I need to snap everybody to attention. I said we have to incorporate programs that I have implemented in other correctional facilities over the years that I know that PACT needs because it's not in this facility. And they said, okay, well, let's do it. I kind of worked my way up through the ranks. I started recruiting guys from the membership and training them. Now the program, for all practical purposes, is left to the vice president, which is Delroy Thorpe, and the secretary, executive secretary, which is Mario Castro.
I think what sets us apart is that we have a strong level of integrity and we really try to work to help up everybody. This is not for the parole board. This is not to impress anybody. This is who we are.
I've been a part of PACT for about 2 years now. I'm an executive member. I'm a secretary of the organization. I came from Attica Correctional Facility. Men lost their lives through a riot that took place because the conditions were so terrible inside of the prison setting.
But I've never seen anything like this. The people in here are treated like dogs.
We no longer wish to be treated as statistics. We want to be treated as human beings.
Those men held the facility under control for about 4 or 5 days.
Well, I can say, Mr. President, only cause is I wanted to alert you that we were going in, and by taking and putting down a gas attack from helicopters, and then having sharpshooters on the wall, we were able to pick off either from the wall or as our men went in, the men who had the knives at the throat of the hostages. And they did a fabulous job.
How many? I only got the report this morning. What is the latest report? How many people?
Hostages were killed.
How many prisoners were killed?
32.
32 prisoners.
The uprising at Attica Prison shone a spotlight on prisons in a way that was unprecedented in this country because people watched it on the nightly news as it unfolded, and as I'm sure you're aware, a lot of people lost their lives, both people who were incarcerated and staff members. And so there was a call for examination, and one of the major calls that came out of that was for more transparency. People really wanted to understand how this could have happened and what we could do so that it wouldn't happen again.
The Attica Accords were a series of reforms introduced by the administration in the aftermath of Attica. And the most important of those for us was the ability of men and women incarcerated in New York State to be able to meet together and meet with groups from the outside.
A large segment of those that was in that uprising landed in Green Haven Correctional Facilities and started many of the programs that you see there today.
We were the initiators of all the educational programs that took place. Wouldn't be college programs in the prison system if it were not for the ideas that evolved out of the minds of the men who were in the prison system.
Eddie Ellis was a former Black Panther, and a lot of people had looked up to him because he served on a lot of the think tanks after the Attica riot. They had think tanks about getting college inside of the prison system, and he participated in that. He and some other brothers actually etched out the procedure by which the system can follow to bring college into the prison system. He was trying to get every individual to do an introspection of themselves and then determine what was wrong so they can make it right. And then at the same time, he was saying that once we identify the community-specific problems, then we can start combating them one at a time.
He started what is known as the non-traditional approach. It's to actually save our youth and to save our young adults from coming into this system.
And what the non-traditional approach to criminal social justice says is that prison problem solving is a community-specific problem, all right? He said if you pay attention to the communities where the bulk of the prisoners come from, 75% of them have the same problem, and it's not being addressed.
The conclusion of the non-traditional approach was in fact carrying on the baton of the civil rights movement, talking about societal components that generated crime, not necessarily caused it, but there was like plate tectonics that was put in place that would in fact put people at risk.
You know, under PACT, we study the history of movements. But one of the fundamental defects that I think just about all these political social movements had was we didn't address all these phobias that we're addressing now. You know, and in not doing that, we excluded people. And see, PACT doesn't exclude. And that exclusion, non-exclusion, came from the non-traditional approach.
This was the mentorship program, and it came through PACT, you know, and they coupled with the Yale Law students. Now, the Yale Law students brought about an altogether different genre.
For some of the students who were directors, they went every other week. They left the law school shortly before 4. They would get home at close to midnight. They built a curriculum that would go the span of the academic year, but a lot of the intellectual agenda was driven by PACT.
Project for a Calculated Transition has a program that is called the Verbal Arena. What we do is we select 1 or 2 well-tenured members that can keep the facilitation of the discussion going. So the students will come in, the members will come in, and we will sit in a circle. Usually the Yale students or the members of the organization will select a topic, and we will develop a discussion.
This question is for Yale students, and it's for us, but I want the Yale students. I gotta hear y'all.
Ready to dive into this one.
We can go around the room. You can start with my left or you can start with my right. Which theory, out of reading both of them theories, which theory you feel would be more effective for a person that's incarcerated? I'm gonna start with my right.
Yeah, well, I definitely think the empowerment theory would be more effective. And I think a lot of the earlier stuff in the reading on the non-traditional approach kind of touched on those elements, how it's really important to understand these other societal structures involved and how it can be really powerful for people to see how certain things outside of their control may have contributed to where they are and what's going on. So I think the empowerment theory does a better job of getting at the root causes.
The importance of the verbal arena is that a lot of the times incarcerated people do not read or research. And the verbal arena opens up a conduit for guys to learn.
We were talking about projects. We were learning about issues that were really relevant at the time. In 1996 or so, there was the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. We were studying this particular statute and looking at how it impacted us. I mean, we knew to a large extent more about many of the statutes than the law students. They would come in and be like, you guys should be there with us.
I spent a year working in the prisons, and I thought I should be taking people to talk to people of similar age often who are incarcerated. And they should hear what the issues are, and they should bring what they bring and learn what they can learn so that there'd be a mutual learning opportunity. My dad ran a picture framing business and had a van. I borrowed his delivery van. I loaded it up with the Yale Law students and took them to Green Haven. What Green Haven has had for years, for decades actually, is a real cadre of smart, serious, politically thoughtful people, many of whom are long-termers. And that cadre has some impressive people in it.
Just dealing with the litigation of the law, we're dealing with a new language called legalese. So this is a mixture of English and Latin. You know, so now in order to be able to properly litigate a situation, you must understand what the language is and then know the rules for that language. So this is like I would say a Herculean task for us as pro se litigants.
We had gotten some reading on the Reconstruction Amendments. And of course you studied the Reconstruction Amendments in law school, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. So I wasn't an expert, I was only a first-year student, I was in my first semester. But I knew a little bit, I thought. And one of the guys started talking about the 13th Amendment. And he said, well, why does the 13th Amendment exempt prisoners? And I didn't know what he was talking about. And I went back and I looked at the text of the amendment, which I had looked at a couple of times. But I hadn't noticed before that the 13th Amendment says that there should be no slavery or involuntary servitude except for those duly convicted of a crime. Now that's a point that now with the film 13th, that's gotten wide notoriety. But her film came out a couple years ago. This was 20 years before then, and these guys were pointing out a part of the Constitution, and then they followed that up with an analysis of that. And so we had a whole conversation, which mostly involved the incarcerated students teaching us. And there was some back and forth, but mostly involved them teaching us about the Reconstruction Amendments. And I went home, my mind blown, because I had just experienced a master class in constitutional law, constitutional theory, taught by people that the rest of society said had nothing to offer.
I think as a visitor, it's been such a privilege to be in this space where you've created so much warmth. You know, you're talking about difficult things, but you laugh together, you know each other, and you're able to be vulnerable and open with each other. And I think that's really amazing. And I think, you know, coming from being in school and being in law school, we were thinking more about the structural factors about, you know, the criminal system is racist and the punishments are too high and that sort of thing. And I mean, y'all understand those things much better than we do, you know, living through it. But you're focused also on something that we don't think about, which is you're also individuals and you're trying to live well and you're trying to do things better for yourself and for the community that you care about.
This program right here has actually made me see, you know, that little yellow line that's at the end of the road to say that you finished, you completed, you reached a level that you can now actually give back to individuals around you so you can actually change your community. That's what this program has done. Is let me reach that finish line and say, now I am prepared with the tools, with the skills and the mental capacity to now change not just myself, but also the people around me.
The Yale partnership is phenomenal. Them coming in makes me feel like the work we're doing is significant because it's not just what they bring, it's also what we can impart to them. Those young men and those young women are going to make careers out of, you know, their law studies. They get an opportunity to sit with us and know what prison is like from a prisoner's perspective. And I'm happy to be able to guide them in any way that we possibly can. And, you know, to me, that humanistic component is everything.
Being able to have conversations as peers and sometimes as teachers with people who come from an utterly different world in terms of possibility and privilege is a good thing. It helps in terms of their effectiveness. When I was getting ready to graduate, I thought this is important. It shouldn't end. And I passed it on to Chris Stone, who ended up running the Vera Institute and Open Societies Foundation. But I took him to prison for the first time in the back of my dad's delivery van.
The partnership with Green Haven started my first year in law school. Joanne Page had long been bringing interested people to spend conversations with men at Sing Sing Prison, an Ossining Correctional Facility in New York. And a group at Green Haven Prison invited her to come and do something similar there. And she took me along on I think one of the first trips she made there. And when they asked if we could continue to visit, Joni was fully engaged with Sing Sing, and she asked me if I would take the lead in coordinating the Green Haven piece. I was happy to do so, and it became hugely important. I think with every visit, I began to realize I was learning more about what I needed to know to be a criminal defense lawyer from these visits than I was learning in law school.
You would have these conversations, very academic, intellectual conversations, where people would also include some of the context of their lives and their experiences and their perspectives. We were talking about, you know, policing and the Fourth Amendment and the right to stop and seizure. There's a whole different context to the conversation when you're talking to people who lived and came from communities that were over-scrutinized and watched by police.
I think one of the most jarring things about my first time at PACT is how many of the people at PACT grew up in my neighborhood. We all know that there are 7 neighborhoods in New York City that account for the vast majority of the state's prison population, and that was definitely in that conference room.
Almost without exception, the students who traveled to Green Haven were white. And that became an issue. I and my co-student director were both of color, both black women. It was harder to get our black male classmates to come along. And it got to the point where we actually decided to have very frank, candid sit-downs. And we went around and we asked all the black male students in our class. Now, there weren't a lot, there were 4. But we asked them all to come to Green Haven, and if they didn't, we asked them why they wouldn't come. At some point, they kind of, different men that we spoke to opened up to us and explained that it was just really hard, that it was hard for them to be confronted with the visual of so many black and brown people behind bars.
There was a lot that surprised me as I went into Green Haven and kept visiting to be part of this program. It's always shocking how oppressive and dehumanizing of a space a maximum security prison can be. There are reminders of that every day when we visit the men we call friends now inside of Green Haven. At the same time though, I think equally surprising are the moments of deep hope and deep love that I have experienced inside of such a dark place.
I do appreciate and understand that crime-generated factors exist, as Eddie Ellis and Larry Luke Mountain White recognized when creating the non-traditional approach. I understand that, but not everybody reacted the same way to it. And I think that if I'm gonna answer the question, or we're gonna answer that question of how we got here, it should be a little bit more specific. How? Because some people found another way out.
I kind of agree with him, because my sister right now, it's amazing that she has never committed a crime, and right now she is actually retired from where she used to work at, which is a police officer in Connecticut. However, as far as all my brothers, we all traveled through the system. We didn't have a father figure around, so that played an instrumental part in the whole thing, because at the same time, we had to learn how to be a man from the streets.
We are here in prison because we failed. We failed our communities, we failed our families, and decisions we made, we destroyed lives. That's a reality we have to learn how to live with. That is one that doesn't change. We can't go back. There is no place to learn how to deal with that. I'm so grateful with PACT because it is a platform to learn how to deal with that.
Castro is exceptional. He came into the facility not reading, no education, in the streets.
I came in the prison system at the age of 21 as an illiterate high school dropout. I had a 4th grade reading level, and I was tired. I wanted to leave the street lifestyle, but at that point I was so consumed by it that I didn't think that a way out existed. When I came to prison and I saw the conditions in which we had to live in, I told myself I was done.
He came into jail and he figured out, okay, I made a mistake, but I'm gonna learn from this mistake. Taught himself how to read, taught himself everything. He's in the Supermax, locked in, teaching classes, building programs, doing things to better oneself. And he tells me, he says, you can do it. And I believe him, I can do it. So now I'm like the major copy guy for the PACT organization, and we do copies, legal copies for the whole correctional facility. It's hard because some people don't have that type of money. It's 10 cents a page, and we try to assist them any way we can. So what I like about PACT, if they don't, person don't have it, we'll help them as best as they can.
Each individual that becomes a PACT member has idiosyncratic needs. They're different. They vary from one individual to another. And what the leadership impact does is find those nuances. And those ways we help one another for the membership through the activities that are established, like the Excel in School project. You know, it's an opportunity to interact, socialize with people from the outside community in a positive way. You know, the Excel in School project is the book bag initiative where PACT buys school supplies for kids and hands them out in the visiting room. We don't interact daily in a social, you know, way with most folks from the outside. But that's a positive way to do it, you know, to try to bring some normalcy into our abnormal environment.
We just don't run our programs just to say we run the programs and we helping guys. We genuinely want guys to change. We stand out because we honestly, from our heart, want to see a change in each and every person that comes in our class.
We coexist here, we grow here, we learn how to be men here. We probably become better men in here than we ever were when we were outside.
These men are valuable. They have a valuable role to play in our communities. And to keep them in prison, it's like you're taking a valuable member of the community away. Because they have shown that these men have been a valuable asset to every prison they've been in for decades. And it's no question that they will be even greater value to their home community wherever they go. So to keep them in prison is just pure vengeful punishment. And that's what we have to resist. We have to get rid of that culture of just punishing people, because that's not what parole is supposed to be about. You know, the process of releasing men and women from prison is about not only their value to themselves, but their value to the families that they have and to the communities they will be returning to. And to deny them release from prison is almost criminal, because you're stealing from the community.